Classic Talk.
So hi, and welcome to another Classic Talk. As you'll notice, we've got Steph from idriveaclassic with us this week. Steph has about 16,000 followers on YouTube and has driven everything from the wacky, the weird, the wonderful, and most recently the actual Mr. Bean's Mini as well. So certainly quite a lot of interesting stuff you've driven over the past few years.
Yeah, well, it's a bit strange because it feels like it's been a few years, but the channel started up last spring. I think it's because there's so many mad cars and so many things that I've jammed in that honestly, it feels like decades to me when I look back at some of those videos. So, yeah.
And your most recent video as well, the Mr. Bean Mini, what was it? Please explain, how did that come about?
Okay, so I'll tell you the story. It's a little bit weird. So I had a message in my inbox from the owner and it said, "Hi, I'm such and such," because I don't really want to give his name away. Yeah. And he said, "Hi, I own Mr. Bean's Mini." And I thought, this must be a wind up. So anyway, he sent me some pictures and I thought, that is Mr. Bean's Mini. So did a bit of digging myself and it said, yep, it is in a private collection. And I thought, okay, it does all add up. I did a bit more digging and I thought, this is the real deal. And it was meant to be, so it was my 15K special. It was actually meant to be my 10K because the owner and I started talking last winter and we said, right, well, he said, let's get it out in spring. I said, that'll be brilliant. We can do it for the 10K. So we were booked to film the first weekend. So Boris announced the lockdown on the Friday. We were due to film on the Saturday. So it all got pushed back. And then we recently did a socially distant review. So it was really, really distant and we worked everything out around it. So if you watch it, there are certain segments where I could have done with being in the car, but we let him drive the car so that we could get the footage. But we did it in kind of a really sensible and safe way. So it was slightly different for me, and it was really, really strange because, and I would never stop talking about this car because you sat there and you just thought, I'm in Mr. Bean's actual Mini. And it was so bizarre because Rowan Atkinson had signed the sun visors, both himself and Mr. Bean. And there was, so a really interesting fact about the car is that because they used several, there were certain things that they'd built into the cars and then they replicated it across the cars. So there were actually 3 windscreen washer jets on this car, which was, if you watched Mr. Bean, I'm sure you have, and that scene where he's driving along and he's brushing his teeth. Yeah. But the reason they had the extra windscreen washer jet was so that they could angle it and Rowan Atkinson could brush his teeth and lean out the window. But the weirdest thing is when I tried it, it's actually really, really difficult to get right. So I was like this, the footage is really dodgy. I really shouldn't have put it in the video because it looks terrible. But it was a really, really beautiful car to drive as well because I'd never driven a Mini. So I walked into it and I thought, and a lot of people are going to shoot me down for this. So when I took out the Beetle, I had a lot of expectations around it. And I thought that was going to be a really nice car to drive. And I drove it and I just thought, not for me. And so I almost went into the Mini with a biased opinion. And I thought, oh, it's going to be overrated. People always say that they're better than Metros, but how could they be more fun? And I got in and I thought, oh, actually, it is a little bit more fun. It's a little bit more fun if you're, I don't know, I enjoy the comforts of the Metro, but if you want to be going fast, almost like a little go-kart on a country road, beautiful to drive, really, really fun. So yeah, so it was really weird because as soon as I got there, I was so starstruck. I just thought, wow, like, I'm here with Mr. Bean's actual Mini. And yeah, it was just incredible. I could not believe that the car was there and that I got to drive it as well, because that's an enormous amount of trust that somebody gave me to drive that car. So yeah, so it was really, honestly, it was really, really immense. That's the only way I can describe it. It was incredible.
Yeah, I think, Steph, that's one of the things I was going to ask you about actually is what's the reaction do you get from people when you are driving their car? Because sometimes when I'm reviewing a car for a magazine or something, and I turn up and I ask them about, can I drive it? And it's like, you feel I mean, you're there to drive the car, but you still feel cautious about asking them, and that you feel they're going to say, get lost because you can't drive my car. But do you get any kind of sense of extra trepidation about
Well,
getting in your feet?
I always have a really, really long chat with people before we do any filming. So I make sure before I've even got there that we have a big, long conversation so that everybody feels massively at ease. And something that I got a piece of advice from Ian at Hubnut. And because I said, because in the beginning, I used to take the owners out with me because I thought, well, that was the way to do it. And I thought, I'm not getting to film in the way that I would like to film because the owner's here. And so Ian gave me some great advice, and he said, you can ask the owner not to be in the car with you. And I thought, yeah, I will actually do that. And some people are more nervous than others. But by and large, most people, bizarrely, are really happy to chuck me the keys. And in fact, I recently took, I don't know if you saw, what was it called? The mad three-wheeler, the Bond mini car, and we took the Bond mini car out, and the lady who owns it is absolutely crackers, and she won't mind me saying that because she told me herself that she was crackers. And she said, oh, actually, will you drive me? And I thought, God, that's a bit of it's almost like driving a parent when you drive the owner of that car. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, Andy, where you're almost like on a driving test, you're like, checking every mirror, being really slow. Whereas when you get the car and you get it for yourself and you can get to take it out, you can sometimes have a more natural reaction and a bonding experience of that car. And that's something that I've really learned over the last year, is that you do need that one-on-one time to get it right. And some people are very cautious. And if I ever get the feeling that I think, and this is terrible probably to say, but if I ever get the feeling that I think somebody is going to put up blockers or that they're going to hamper that filming experience, I sometimes say, look, why don't you either take some time to feel comfortable, or you can say no completely. And so I've only had a couple of instances like that, but I think you sometimes have to sacrifice cars so that you can get a better film of the cars that you actually film. So that's a really good answer, sorry.
That's fine. With regards to the filming as well, do you find that a car that you're desperate to drive makes for a good film, or do you get some surprises sometimes, or letdowns, anything like that?
Oh, so I feel terrible saying I'm not going to say which car it was, but there was a car that I was absolutely desperate to test, and it was something that I'd spotted so when we went to Belgium last year, we went around a scrapyard and I saw this particular car, and I thought, I'd really like to drive one of those. I think they look amazing. And I imagined that I think I built it up in my head about what this car was going to be like. And when I drove it, I was really disappointed, because whilst it had all the style that you'd want in a car, it didn't have that substance. The column change was sloppy. Just the driving experience wasn't as I would have wanted it to be. And I was really, really disappointed. And I thought, I don't know. I thought it was going to be better. And then other than that, so my auntie had a Volvo 340, and she said it's a fantastic car. Really loved it, and said it was just brilliant to drive. So when I went out in one, I'd gone into it with that feel of, it's going to be amazing. And whilst it was a really nice car to drive, it didn't have that excitement as some of the other classics that I've taken out, because you got into it and there was just a lot of grey black plastic, and I don't know, for me it just didn't have that classic vibe that I'd been expecting. Beautiful car to drive. I mean, if you want a cheap Volvo that is really safe, the handling is great, but you're not too bothered about that traditional classic element, it's a really good car, the Volvo 340. And then I guess as well, like on the flip side of cars that have surprised me, I was really, really surprised by the Nissan Bluebird. I thought that was going to be a bit of a filler car, like it's there and I've been offered it and it's interesting. But when I took it out, I was so impressed. And in fact, I was so impressed that I put my friend onto them, and she went and bought one based on my experience alone with the test car. So I know that sounds a bit bizarre, but that's kind of the flip side of it. And that's always quite interesting. And sometimes I actually prefer to be surprised when I go into a review and think, oh, it's going to be a bit boring. And you get into it and you think, oh, actually, it's really exciting. That for me is sometimes more of a thrill than testing a car that I actually wanted to test, because I like having my opinions challenged.
Mm. I remember driving a DeLorean about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it was, I went all the way to Leeds to test it, and the guy had it in a warehouse, and then we went on a test drive, and I took over about halfway up a dual carriageway on the edge of Leeds, and the thing broke down on a roundabout.
No.
And when I was driving, I'd only driven it about a mile, and it turned out there wasn't enough fuel in it. Then when we tried to get it going again on the roundabout, the battery died because it wasn't charged up enough because it'd been in storage. Then once we got the battery charged, it wouldn't start properly because apparently when they run out of fuel because of the fuel injection, you get an airlock or there's something vacuum issues with them.
No.
Yeah, so he's basically stuck on this roundabout. But while he went to sort out fuel and everything else, I was getting all the abuse on the roundabout from people passing by, where's the dock and this kind of stuff, and why don't you go back in time and fix it and all this kind of stuff. But to be honest, that was probably the biggest disappointment of driven. It wasn't just the breaking down, that kind of tainted it a little bit, but actually the driving position I didn't feel was great, and obviously there's the performance of those cars anyway isn't amazing anyway. It's claustrophobic. So there's that thing, isn't there, of never meet your heroes. And I know I drove a Citroen DS a few years ago, and that was okay. And everybody has said it's probably the best car I've ever driven as a classic. And it was all right. The ride was great. But again, you just kind of got to throw everything out the window and not think about it too much. Get in the car, drive it, relax, and have enough time with it, just like you said. Get to know it like the owner would get to know it. But yeah, it's funny how you have these reactions to things. I mean, I love VW Beetles. You mentioned about you driving a VW Beetle. I love that. I've had a few of them, and I've had a few Minis as well. But they're okay for different reasons, I think, aren't they? There's a lot of cars are like that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, and I'm sure you know this if you've encountered owners clubs, it's really, really weird how some cars attract certain types of personalities. Like, pardon?
No, yeah, I get it.
Agreement, yeah.
Yeah, and you go into a car club. So I went into I had a midlife crisis, and I bought a Mark II Golf, which I hated. I don't know why I bought it, to be honest. I think it was just a weird crisis. I thought, I'm going to have something more modern. That is what I want to do. And it turns out I didn't want to do that at all. But when I kind of joined the owners club, I realized that I was just so different to all the other owners, and I thought, this is so weird, because I've come from the world of Morris Minors, and everybody in the Morris Minor owner club I felt was on a very similar wavelength to me, whereas the Mark II club was very trendy. People were cool. They were like young lads, and I don't know, I just didn't really fit in. I just thought, and that for me was a minus point, because I think if you buy a car, being involved with the owners club is such an important thing to do. I mean, it's funny because when I bought the Metro, a lot of the Morris Minor people had also owned a Metro. So when I joined the Metro Owners Club, it wasn't a group of faces that I didn't recognise. There were lots of people, in fact, where I recognised. I thought, what are we all doing picking the same cars? But I think it's just that whole, it's everything that comes with it, isn't it?
One thing actually about Morris Minors in general is when you go to shows, whether it's a huge one like the NEC or something like Motorfest at Ormskirk, which I'm sure we're all quite familiar with, is that the people who are knocking around the Morris Minors are always really approachable and not the kind of chat that puts you off as well, because sometimes you get people who just give you so much opinion information like, oh, all right, and step back, whereas you don't really get that with Moggies.
No, to be fair, the owners club are really welcoming. So when I joined back in 2009, there wasn't a young member constituency, but a couple of the boys came together, and obviously I became involved, and that was very that was set up very early on. And I think the club are great because they've won awards for it, but they're very responsive to change in terms of they'll look at things and say, well, we need to do more of this, or we need to do more of that. Whereas I think some of the owners clubs can be a bit stuck in the past and they don't really embrace what's coming up, which is a shame, because you see some of these cars and they're great, but you get into the owners clubs and you get some, because a lot of people that I film with are younger, because you know, you get those offers and you think, well, why not? So just some of the cars that I've tested, they've said, you know, oh, we don't actually have a great community. Like if we need something, we don't really, people aren't approachable. And it's like, what a shame. And I mean, I'm sure you guys already know that the Triumph Club have got TR Youth, and they're very approachable. Again, I don't know what it is about Triumph owners, but they're all really fun. So if you go and visit their stand at the NEC, they always have like a few drinks on, and I think that's not why I go over, but they have a few drinks on, a few nibbles, and everybody's really fun. And I think that's travels through the young constituency as well, just really nice people. I think the British car scene, to be honest, is, I'm banging on, but I think the British car scene is just so nice, and for me it can't be topped. I think everybody's just so lovely.